Hello and welcome to the Non-Profits. My name's Damien and I'm joined by my co-hosts Trust But Verify and Eli. And this is episode 24.45, segment 2. And for this one, we will be discussing Joe Rogan and his recent comments on a podcast. So in a recent interview with Trigonometry co-host Konstantin Kisin and Francis Foster on his own show, The Joe Rogan Experience, Joe Rogan praised religion, and in particular Christianity, for being able to stabilize people's lives and made statements that Jesus Christ had the best plan for how humans should live and interact with each other. Further to this, Rogan appeared to express a pro-life / anti-abortion position by commenting, "If you're just relying on your whims and whatever you think is the moral thing to do, you know what you get? You get those people that are unable to answer the question of whether or not you should protect an unborn fetus or whether or not they have human rights." So, is Joe Rogan about to become a regular churchgoer, and is he right about religion and in particular Christianity? This article is from NewsNation by reporter Susie Pinto and updated on October the 27th, 2025. So, gentlemen, just my very basic prima facie opinion on that, to me, it's very hard to distinguish what Joe Rogan is saying here from Richard Dawkins' own popular views on religions, because what I see is roughly similar in that religion gives people an aim, something to focus on, and helps people when they're struggling with personal issues. Though I think Joe Rogan and Richard Dawkins may differ on some particular aspects. But Trust But Verify, what's your take on what Joe Rogan has said?
You know, to me, I think Rogan's church phase, as we can probably call it, it sounds less like enlightenment and more like a midlife flirtation with ancient fan fiction. I mean,
okay,
you know, religion can create community, but so can bowling leagues, and, you know, or you can do bunko on Thursdays or something like that. You know, why do you have to demand belief in invisible overseers? You know, so calling biblical stories fascinating doesn't make them true. It's just old and overhyped.
Fair enough. And Eli, can I get your first comments?
Yeah, I think that he mentions during it, like this whole interview segment, that like people are going to church to better their lives, and I think that notion, when people hear it, they're like, well, yeah, like that's what happens. But what actually is taking place, and like the reason most people are leaving the church, is they're realizing that churches find people who are desperate, or people who are desperate are drawn to churches because, at least here in the West, we've grown up all our lives with like this Christian imagery and like Jesus saves billboards all over the street and like Catholic saints outside government buildings, like we talked about on Monday. And they're looking for like help, like whether it just be community or just the impression that somebody cares, and so they find that in this community in the church. But the church is also like sort of influencing their behavior, and the way it is like, well, there's this code of behavior that you have to follow, as there is in all religions, and you know, by following that you are good, and they're not accepting the person and they're not helping the person, they're just shaping the person into someone that is beneficial to the church, and because they're receiving this dopamine hit of being loved or cared for or wanted or part of this community, then they feel like their life is improving. So I guess that wasn't my surface thought. Surface thought was, I think he misunderstands church.
Wow, that's a very, very good abbreviation.
Yeah.
Abbreviation there.
Yeah.
So just reading. Sum it up. So look, I'll read a couple of paragraphs from this article and I'll get some general discussion from us all.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan says, it's a bunch of people who are going to try and make their lives better. They're trying to be a better person, and they're trying to, I mean, for me at least, the place that I go to, they read and analyze passages in the Bible. I'm really interested in what these people were trying to say, because I don't think it's nothing. Which is that's interesting, and I think what you said just before, Eli, about people being better. It's, I suppose, better for who? And me in particular, when I'm discussing religion with religious people, and just to clarify, all three of us here are non-believers. Hence the atheist community of Austin. But one of the points I make when I discuss religion with believers is that the same Bible that the Salvation Army or the Anglican Church read is also the same Bible that the Westboro Baptist Church reads.
Yeah, exactly. And and again, you can get, if you're in a bad spot, if you're in a low spot, there are plenty of places to get, relief, or, answers, or, or just to assuage your fears, and I think that's what it really comes down to. There's support groups that you can go to that are, that are not religiously affiliated, that can give you that, that mechanism to kind of talk things out and find, these spaces where you can be safe and, and accepted and all that stuff. And, and I think when I was a Christian, I think one of the things that, there were times in my life when I went to the Christian church and I was down and out, and the overarching message, the reinforcement I got was, well, yeah, because you're bad, you're a sinner, you're faulty, you're broken, you're just fundamentally flawed, and you need Jesus. That's why you're here. So be lucky that Jesus is here to save you.
Yep. Though, Trust, I do want to have a brief discussion with you on something that you mentioned before, that that bowling leagues can also create a community. But I suppose the point of contention I'm contriving here is that bowling leagues are basically guys, or people, I should say, who are just there for bowling and may have drinks afterwards and things like that. But what I think church does, and what I think Joe Rogan's trying to point at, is there's this kind of whole life, or very holistic kind of I suppose support. You go to service on Sundays, you may have lunch afterwards as well, but then you have your midweek Bible studies. You then have people, I know in previous congregations I've been in, you have people constantly checking up on you. I don't know if you're familiar with the shepherding movement, but in churches I've been in, you had a person in the church that you were accountable to as well. And if you had any particular issues, you would take them to them, and they would try to coach you through life. So I think what church is, the difference between a bowling league and a church is that churches do try to be more holistic. What would you say? What would you say to that?
I can say that you do have a point there. Now, if you want to be more holistic, again, you can go to, say, a support group, or you can go to an organization that has those type of things, that it doesn't have to be religious, and so if you can go to these places, and it has all of the same elements that churches like this have. There's no need to, such as the having a cause, like if you want to do a food drive or something like that. And, I think of the deconstruction community, although, there seems to be this conception that we are largely like disjointed. And, in a lot of ways that's true. However, I found that, there are some deconstruction communities out there, although they're not like, famous and well named, that you get into these deconstruction communities, and then you start doing things like of this sort, and they come out in mass. If you have like a fundraiser, like, recently I did a cancer fundraiser with my wife, and the deconstruction community came out in force and just supported it, and we had a fun time, and people showed up and things like that. And I've seen it in other places too, where there was somebody who had trouble deconstructing very recently that I know of, and they were really struggling and going through a very hard time, and the community just stepped in. They gave her resources, they gave her support, and now she has like this body of people who replaced that what she thought that she had with church, and she found out that she didn't have. But now all these people from the community, the deconstruction community, just stepped right in and filled that void for her. So it can, things like that can be found. I think the main point we're missing here, though, is that you should be in a religion because there's a God behind it, that this God exists. Isn't that the main point of why you are joining a religion in the first place?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. So, Eli, I'll get to you in a sec, but Trust, I do want to ask you a very pointy question based on one of the sentences in your notes. Secular morality doesn't need divine permission to be decent, but do you think it makes it easier to be decent?
I don't think so.
Or do you think the concept of divine permission makes it easier to be decent?
You know what? In all honesty, I think it actually makes you less decent. Okay. I said it. I'm gonna go out there. I said it, and here's why. In my content creation, I see a lot of I do expose this. This appearance of oh well, you need a divine authority to have morality, and all we got to do is we just start looking at the Bible and we start picking it apart. And I ask simple questions like, when is it okay for a man to sell his daughter into slavery? I just asked something like that. When is it okay? Is it okay to, if some person, commits a bad deed, is it okay to punish an innocent person for that person's bad deed? Because that happens in the Bible. To me, that is not moral. I'm sorry. It's just not.
No, I do stand with you there. I will, speaking from my religious hat, though, I think the argument that religious people would make was that, yes, secular people can do a facsimile of what church does, but without the spirit behind it.
Well,
Which
I mean,
we probably don't all agree with, but I think if I was to put my religious hat on from 30 years ago, that would be the argument I would make.
Yeah, and I remember saying stuff like that too as a former Christian. And honestly, Damien, I got to tell you, I mean, I don't believe in spirit. I know that there are some agnostics and atheists who do believe in like spirituality and things like that. So we're a diaspora as far as that concerned. We're not a monolith. But me personally, I think that what really counts is compassion, empathy, love, those type of things. That's what counts. And, we have yet to have any evidence that any of those things come from a spirit or a higher, like a divine source.
No, I stand with you there, Eli. Can I I'll bring the discussion over to you now. Trust, thank you for your very interesting points there. There's a paragraph there's a quote from Joe Rogan. I want to get your thoughts on it. Christianity in particular is the most fascinating to me because there is this one person that everybody agrees existed that somehow or another had the best plan for how human beings should interact with each other and behave, and was the best example of it, and even died in a non-violent way, like didn't even protest, died on the cross supposedly for our sins. Like, it's a fascinating story. Eli, I think you'd have a thing or five to say about that.
I don't find the story that fascinating, for one, and maybe it's just because it's not novel to me, and because I don't, and I have. So, like, I think that the Norse pagan god stories and I think the stories about other gods, I think those are fascinating because I don't have the personal emotional relationship with them. Like, this is what I grew up being told was the truth and believing, and then realized later that it wasn't. So there are some aspects of some of those stories that I think are kind of interesting to think about in a mythological way, but the primary things, I just don't find the story that fascinating. But the idea that Jesus had like this perfect way to live, as he called it, and was the best example of that. And I think like there's plenty of examples of Jesus like not living up to the sinless nature that, like, for example, like when he beat the hell out of those dudes outside of the temple or in the temple or whatever it was. I don't know the story that well.
The temple, the marketplace out the temple.
Yeah,
exactly.
The
temple
market. Yes.
You know, overthrew the tables and what? Yeah,
exactly. So, like that aside, he wasn't a perfect example of what he called the perfect way to live, and calling it the perfect way to live is a complete, like, that's a statement that you need to do some work to justify.
Yeah. Indeed.
And
because
so,
sorry, you first.
Yeah, no, you can go ahead. That was
okay. That's right. Because I was going to ask which Jesus, because in my reading of the Gospels, to me, there seems to be 4 different Jesuses that can be meshed if you chop and change and mix things around. But for example, in Mark, Jesus is very human and he seems to be almost reluctant to be on his messianic mission. And then you go all the way to John, who I would argue is probably the most anti-Semitic Jesus, given how many times he excoriates the Jews for their things. So I'd ask, which Jesus does he think is the perfect, or does he think the hippie of Luke, the peacenik hippie of Luke is the best Jesus? I would
yeah,
argue
that's a good question. I would be surprised to learn that Joe Rogan even knows that there's a difference between the Jesuses. And if so, the common argument is, oh well, the Gospels were written for different purposes. And so they're describing Jesus in the way that like fits their purpose. And like, why is that a supporting argument for you? Yeah. Like, I don't see how that helps your case at all, but that's what it is.
Indeed. But I do want to throw the discussion open. I think the first part of Joe Rogan's statement there, I think we'll argue till the cows come home. This one person that everybody agrees existed. Where do we stand on the Jesus existing or not? Well, what's our collective take on that?
I land on the historicist side, but I really like reading the mythicist argument, I could very easily be convinced.
Fair enough. And trust. What's your take?
I was slightly leaning towards the historicist side, like you, Eli. Yet, I don't know if I can say this book here, but I've been reading a book that's a mythicist book that lays out some very compelling evidence that Jesus never existed. And every chapter I read of this book, it inches me closer and closer to Jesus didn't exist. I'm like right on the fence. I mean, about as on the fence as you can be.
I might have the same book, and I might have that same book, and I just haven't opened it yet.
You haven't opened it yet? Okay.
Yeah.
I think I can say it.
Can we ask what that book is?
It's called Christ Before Jesus. And and it's a you know what? I can't remember the name of the author, but they did something called stellometry, and what they did was they did a computer analysis of all the writings of the New Testament, and what they found were some very profound things that make it to them pretty obvious that Jesus was a fictional character. And it's provocative because this goes against the scholarly consensus, because scholarly consensus is likely, there was a character named Jesus who existed. It may be based on it may be a fictionalized character, like a Paul Bunyan type character, but it was based on somebody or something like that. But this particular book, blows all of that out of the water. And so I'm reading this and I haven't finished it yet, but like I said, every chapter I read, it just like, that's interesting, So, but even if we grant that Jesus did exist, we still don't have evidence of Jesus's resurrection. We don't have any evidence that he rose from the dead and then went into heaven. We don't have any evidence of that. And if you just start picking apart the whole story, it just crumbles. It crumbles to bits, like a dry cookie, on your dashboard. It's been sitting on your dashboard a week. It just crumbles to dust, literally.
Yeah. So All right, so the book is by Matthew Britt and Jaron Wingo. Christ
There it
Before
is.
Jesus, Evidence for the Second Century Origins of Christianity. So if you want a fascinating read, as per Trust But Verify, that's there. So I'll just go through one more particular paragraph that's quoted in this NewsNation article. When I watch super religious people that are praying 5 times a day, and I'm like, that is amazing. Look how dedicated they are to that thing. Like there's an attractiveness to that. Rogan said in reference to Islam. If I was that dedicated to something, I'd probably be like way more stable in my life. I've got a friend who's a devout Muslim and he's going through tough times at the moment. And I say to him, like, how do you get through this? And he's like, bro, I've got my religion. So what do we want to say about that in the couple of minutes we have left remaining?
For me, it's meaningless because you could be dedicated to something, any kind of pursuit, and it will bring stability to your life. I think what we're kind of missing here, or maybe Joe's missing, is the fact that there's the routine that's involved. There is the dedication, the routine that praying 5 times a day means you have to structure your entire life around meeting this thing that you have to do 5 times a day. I mean, just imagine if you committed yourself to working out 5 times a day, how you'd have to change your entire life to make sure that happens, and so I don't think that matters, what you do. If you're doing something 5 times a day I don't know how long the Muslim prayers take, if either of you guys know, but I imagine it's more than just like 30 seconds. I mean, they got to put the prayer rug out, they got to face east and all that stuff, right? I'm sure it takes time, right? So if you're taking time out of your day to do that 5 times a day, that is a significant amount of your life that you're dedicating to this one thing. So it means nothing.
Yeah. Fair enough. And Eli, do you want to end the conversation with your thoughts?
Yeah, I thought basically the same thing. It's this idea that prayer is the same exact thing as meditation, right? Yeah. The only difference is you're adding something that you're meditating to, and meditation inherently, like without religion, is just like the idea. In most cases, is focusing on nothing. In this case, you focus on this deity, and remember that all of the horrible shit you're going through is because he wants you to go through it. It's his perfect plan for you to go through all this horrible, traumatizing, like exhausting shit, and now everything is okay. And I think it's just like another like narcissistic, it's not a narcissistic necessarily, but like a gaslighting tactic that religion uses to keep people content with being miserable. I think that's about as much as I can say, I think, without repeating myself.
Nice. Well, those are some very interesting last words. So Eli, thank you. Trust But Verify, thank you. And if you want more nonprofits, click on the links wherever they happen to be on the screen, possibly around there somewhere.
It's over there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, find it.